Before we get to the Q&A, we just want to invite our co-counsel up, Bill Perdue, who argued a motion before the Second Circuit a few weeks ago, I guess, that some of you came to. Bill's going to talk about the legal issues in this case, just to color the argument, and then we'll go into Q&A. So hopefully you all have lots of questions.
Thanks, Jessica. So I'm Bill Perdue at Arnold & Porter, along with my colleague Stanton Jones and Jessica and Alina. We represent Ravi in his First Amendment case against ICE. It is our great privilege to represent him in this case. The claim that Ravi is making in this case is really quite simple. ICE is trying to deport him. They're targeting him and trying to deport him in retaliation for his activism, for the purpose of trying to silence not only Ravi himself, but the whole sanctuary movement in New York City and honestly across the country. That is what they're trying to do, and it is unconstitutional. On Monday, my colleague Stanton will be arguing in front of 3 judges of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals down at Foley Square here in New York City. I hope all of you come. It's at 10 a.m. The arguments start at 10 a.m. We'll probably be up a little bit late. The court has recognized that this is a big, important case, so they're giving us a little more time and putting us at the end so that they can ask lots of questions, which is a good sign so far. At this point, we're not asking for much. We are only asking for a temporary injunction, the chance for Ravi to stay here in the country while we gather the evidence that we need and present that evidence to a court to show that this is really what is happening, that ICE really is trying to deport him because of his activism. All we're asking for the court to recognize at this point is that if we're right about that, that's unconstitutional. You wouldn't think this would be that controversial, but it's going to be a challenge. We are at a very preliminary stage. All we are asking for is the chance to gather the evidence and put it in front of a court. But even at this stage, we have really good evidence. You saw what things looked like on January 11th when Ravi was arrested. Days before that incident, Ravi's counsel and representatives of the New Sanctuary Coalition were talking to some of the top ICE leadership in the New York field office, and one of them said, point blank, I told John Montreville, Ravi's colleague who's now been deported, you don't want to say things, you don't want to make matters worse by saying things. You never see that in a case like this. You just don't see somebody say that outright to someone's face. Don't say things or else. But that's what we have here. And that's not all of it. It's ICE shut down the waiting room where New Sanctuary volunteers had been accompanying non-citizens to their check-ins, accompanying non-citizens, including Ravi himself. The manner in which they carried out the arrest, Ravi's arrest, was, in the words of one judge, unnecessarily cruel. They arrested him without any notice whatsoever, even though he had a stay in place that should have lasted for at least another week. He lost consciousness when they first detained him, and they thought he might have had a heart attack, and yet they intentionally, by their own admission, took him to one hospital and took his wife to another one. That same day, they put him on a plane to Florida that afternoon, and they would have deported him from the country the next day, if not for the intervention of a court, which ICE was quite close to ignoring. And that's what we have right now, before we've even had a chance to really gather the real evidence and put these decision makers on the stand and ask them what they were really doing. So this case is important, and there's really a lot at stake. I won't sugarcoat it for you. It's scary how much is at stake. Ravi's ability to stay in this country, his life here is at stake, but it's about more than that. What ICE is trying to do is to silence a movement. You heard Ravi and his comrades, we all like to say, you cannot deportive movement? Well, ICE is trying to say they can. And that's part of what is at stake here. And honestly, if the government's view in this case is disturbing, their view is that there is no First Amendment rights for someone in Ravi's situation. If in their view, ICE could tell any non-citizen with a final order of removal, you cannot criticize us. If you do, we will deport you. You cannot attend a rally. If you do, we will deport you. You cannot speak out in any way, or we will deport you. In fact, in the government's view, they could tell you, actually, you have to speak out in favor of us. You have to go to a pro-ICE rally. You have to go call your congressman and support legislation praising ICE, or we will deport you. That is their position, and that is disturbing. It should not be the law, but that's what we're up against. That's what we're arguing on Monday, and I hope all of you and anyone you can come in contact with to bring with you will be there to show your support. Thanks very much.
So we'd like to invite the speakers to come up here and open this up for some Q&A. Everyone. So, who has questions? Questions about the First Amendment, case? Sure.
I was just wondering, can you, outside of Robert's case, can you talk about some other evidence that you are being targeted specifically because of the speaking out?
I think this was directed at me. So yes, there is other evidence. We do believe this is not just about Ravi. This is a widespread pattern across the country. One of the things we're trying to do in Ravi's case is to get more evidence about the extent of that pattern. But from what we can tell, just from media reports and that kind of thing, there have been dozens of incidents like this. All over the country. There have been activists in Vermont, in Washington State, in Virginia, in Mississippi. You name it, it's happened. And some of them are quite brazen. There was a news report about a man who spoke to a newspaper reporter in Seattle about the deportation of his partner. And a few days later, an ICE agent came up to him and started questioning about his status and said, "My supervisor told me to come find you because of what was in the newspaper." Again, you don't usually see evidence of retaliation that strong before you even get into the real evidence. So there's pretty good evidence that there's a real pattern here, and that's part of what we're trying to fight.
And if I could actually, Judy, I hate to put you on the spot, but you might testify to this. Could you just talk a little bit about what's happening?
My name is Judy Ragbir, and I'm just even more
I'm really speaking on the spot.
Yeah, sorry, Trudy, you have to walk up to the microphone.
I'm an attorney with the National Immigration Law Center, and I've been working with some other folks at other organizations as well. And we have been litigating a FOIA lawsuit, actually, with Migrant Justice, which is a group up in Vermont that has seen a number of their members get arrested, particularly like leaders of their organization. So we have been trying to get more evidence and information about what the government, what ICE has been doing there as well. So, yeah.
And the work of Migrant Justice.
Yeah, Migrant Justice works with migrant farm workers and dairy farms in Vermont. Let's see, they have been pioneering a Milk with Dignity program to sort of uplift the standards of dairy workers in the state, and have also been done a ton of work around putting in place fair and impartial policing policies, and winning driver's privileges cards, which are a form of driver's licenses up in Vermont. So they've been very active in the immigrant rights movement and are a real powerhouse up there.
Yeah. And suspiciously, as they've been doing this work and after some very high-profile protests and rallies, their leaders have really been plucked out one by one. And it's exactly what we've seen with New Sanctuary. So thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot. I think Ravi, you're...
I was just, I didn't believe that this is not about me. I thought everything was about me. That's it.
Well, on that note, we also know that Morrow just filed a similar First Amendment suit in Oregon. Is that right? Washington, sorry. I get them confused. And we're sure there could be others as well. I personally have had conversations with ICE leadership who've talked about the indignity of people standing on camera criticizing them and thinking they get to stay in the country. So.
Just to clarify, so is the government's stance that is it folks with final orders of deportation have no First Amendment rights, or is it just pretty much all non-citizens, or folks in proceedings?
Their position in this case is about non-citizens with final orders of removal, but you never know how bad their position is going to get in the next case. So I wouldn't make no commitments for them about. But the position they've articulated here is really about non-citizens with final orders of removal, who, like in Ravi's position. And to be clear, that's a lot of people. I mean, there are 900,000 people in the United States living under orders of supervision. That's people with final orders who have authorization to stay here. So it's a lot of people.
Yeah, I would just add that in other cases, the government has kind of made that broader claim that non-citizens in general might not have First Amendment rights, or at least not as robust rights as citizens. And it has tried to draw that distinction between immigrants who have been lawfully admitted into this country and undocumented immigrants, and have suggested that undocumented immigrants don't have